welcome into the Chris Collinsworth podcast. We are going to break it down. Whatever this is, what is it? Week 7? Week 7. Here we go. We've got Trevor Sikkema and Eric Eager with us here on the program. Thanks for stopping by, guys. How's life? Are we all good?
It's good. Week 7. I mean, we're still hanging in there. I don't think that we're off the rails too much, Eric, although Eric has to see a lot of me because he does 2 shows with me, the college show and the NFL. So maybe I'm speaking for him.
Look, the money's green no matter what, and the betting, especially in college football, has been good this year.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
I always thought that would be our biggest advantage, is that nobody has the information we have on college football, right? And you're like deranged. You watch it all. I can't even keep up with the NFL.
I went to an FC Cincinnati game just to get away from it on Saturday. With
Did you bet it?
Yeah. Well, of course I did. Right? What does this look like?
What was that? So did you win?
No. Yeah. Well, yeah. So like I get there, I'm like explaining my, the average father is like scared that their kids will ask them about math problems and homework, but I'm praying to God that like my kids don't have to ask me what offsides is. So I'm watching this game and FC gets down 1-0, and I'm like, okay, I need a sweat. I can't watch this game. I'm like Pete Rose. I can't watch this game without having some pride on it. So I bet Cincinnati plus 1.5 goals, and the game ended 1-0. So I was like, okay. I could do it.
So as long as it's 1-0, then
yeah. That's why I basically bet there would be no more scoring, and that happened.
It's so funny. We have bets for college football and NFL football, and every now and then Eric will say something. I'll be like, man, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I'm going against Eric this week, and almost always I'm wrong. Eric's always, and so like I keep trying to push Eric against the wall, and you know what? It hasn't.
Trevor did get on my side last week with Kentucky covering against Georgia.
Never.
So
that was late, right?
Never.
That was a championship drive by Kentucky to backdoor that spread.
God bless him.
That makes 6 straight weeks now my phone is wrong during the podcast. You'd think at this
you're a
point
busy guy.
I would actually know to turn it off.
Person.
All right, here we go. This is my favorite way to start these shows. Our PFF team of the week. All right,
let's do it.
Let's go down and we kind of stop on the surprises. Okay. Carson Wentz. I'm going to go right there, right off the bat. He hit the big plays against the Texans that team has really been missing, and if they can do that, maybe.
I mean, it
was Houston, but
right, but it's still like whole season has been night and day for Carson Wentz, and sometimes, of course, like it's the familiarity with Frank Reich again, being in Indianapolis when he had a lot of success with him in Philadelphia, and sometimes that's what it is, but sometimes it's just a change of scenery, right? He was clearly not in the right headspace in Philadelphia, and it's not like the guy got worse at the game of football. It just vanished.
He is an RPO guru. And
he is.
And you can see he's still not moving yet. He's still not, with that foot. I'm going to give it about 80%, maybe 70% there right now.
They're confining him. I think the biggest statistic you could take from him is his 7.8 average depth of target is the lowest in his career. The only one that comes close was his rookie year, which is uber conservative. His 0.4% turnover-worthy play rate is the lowest in his career by a country mile. He has just 1 turnover-worthy play. Yet 8 yards per pass attempt would be his career high if the season ended today. So you're looking at a Frank Reich situation. That it's not like they have brilliance at wide receiver either. Hilton played his first week last week. Obviously, Pittman has done better than expectation there. But it's a phenomenal team effort by the Colts. And if you look at the AFC, after like the first 6, there's one playoff spot open in the AFC for a bad team to make. And I think
there we go. That's what I'm doing on Sunday Night Football. Let's pray for that one spot left in the AFC.
Yeah. And the Indianapolis Colts, when you look at their schedule, they have one of the easier schedules in the NFL moving forward. They have that chance, I think.
They got the running game going, and they maybe get Quentin Nelson back this week. So it's going to be interesting. T.Y. Hilton kind of pulled a quad in the thing, so I'm not sure he's going to be back, but we'll figure it out. Aaron Jones of the Packers against the Bears, no huge surprise. CeeDee Lamb is just he was my favorite player coming out of college. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. I just think he's phenomenal. Odell, how about Odell striking and making the list?
Yeah, so Odell Beckham Jr., I looked this up. Weeks 1 through 5, his average depth of target was 18 yards. Like, they were clearly just using him as a deep receiver. This week, his highest grade yet this season, only 10. yards of average depth of target. So much different. They had him running different routes and different things like that. And I wonder how much it changes with Baker Mayfield out.
Well, and with Odell out, because Odell's not going to play tonight.
Right.
And so it sucks that, like, in Cleveland, it's never really worked out for him.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's just amazing.
And even then, like, he got open and dropped the 4th down pass in the red zone.
People
could have gotten it
down
to one score.
Yeah.
Like, this offense is just out of sync. It'll be interesting to see, and I don't know when this will come out before the game tonight, but, like, it'll be interesting to see where you have Stefanski, who used to coach Case Keenum.
Right.
You're gonna have Case Keenum, and Keenum has had when he was at his best in Minnesota was throwing to guys who were separators, Thielen, Diggs. And you think about,
and he was a wild man. He was
a wild man
everywhere.
But those guys are so open that you're not throwing the picks you're throwing in the weaker teams that you're playing for. Yeah. So I wonder if you're Cleveland, you have a good offensive line once it's healthy. You have a great offensive mind in Stefanski. You have receivers that can get separation. You have a quarterback that's willing to sort of put the ball out there.
Yeah.
Bruce Gradkowski talked about it on a podcast. Why maybe they don't gel. It's when Odell's kind of a freelancer sometimes at the top of the route, maybe somebody like Keenum is better suited for a player like that.
Well, you might run around, buy a little time, and allow that. So Jacoby Myers, Mark Andrews, those are the tight end, a flex player. Jason Peters. How about that? Jason Peters coming back at age, 38, 9? What is he now?
He's 39, and that was a big – hey, how much are the Bears actually getting out of Jason Peters? Because Eagles fans were the ones who were saying that he's not what he used to be, but albeit a not great Bears offensive line, he's the best guy there.
I mean, it just took – I mean, when he first got there, I wasn't sure he was going to be able to get off the bus, and now he's like the best player. Quentin Spain, we've got a Bengals guy on here. That's amazing. Yep. David Andrews, a center from the Patriots, no stunner.
First
Zach Martin.
Cincinnati Bengal to make a team of the week since you, Cris.
Can I give a shout-out to Jacoby Myers real quick? Because I found out this stat when I was researching for this show. He has the most receptions and the most receiving yards of all time for an NFL player that does not have a touchdown. Yeah. He does not have a touchdown yet. I feel so bad for him.
Oh, they hate that stat because every time it's been mentioned on every broadcast, every game, and they're like, just don't even go there.
I heard it for the first time this week, and my mind was blown.
Cornelius Lucas, Zach Martin's on this list every single week. He's unbelievable.
Right.
Armand Watts from the Vikings. There you go, one of your Vikings guys. Cameron Hayward was great. We were watching that game. Randy Gregory. Coming all the way.
Randy Gregory almost killed Mac Jones last week.
I'm going to tell you what, Randy Gregory, like somebody that has gone through what he's gone through, right? You expect, I don't know what the stereotype would be, but you kind of go, oh, he's that, right? Mm-hmm. This is one of the most thoughtful guys. I mean, he is. When you're engaged with a conversation, you can't cheer any harder for this guy. You just can't.
Plays really hard too. That's an immense that's really helped him. I think he's been great.
And it's like the Carson Wentz thing. Like they're just playing with confidence. Like they're comfortable. They're in the right spots, and their talent is able to shine because of that position that they're in and how much confidence they're playing with. And you absolutely saw that. Like you said, he almost killed Mac Jones last week, and that's the kind of play that he's using right now.
I mean, when he's on. I cheer for the guy. Josh Allen for Jacksonville, of course, that is not the quarterback. That is the edge rusher.
Although Josh Allen, the quarterback, maybe could do a little edge rushing. He's big enough, it feels like, to maybe do that if he wants to.
He definitely could. Darius Leonard, who still, I don't think, is right off of that ankle at all. Right. I mean, he's still limping around, but he was making plays all over the place. Derek Barnes, back against the Bengals. There you go. Bashaud Breeland. Coming up big there. Chidobe Awuzie. The Bengals are like littering this thing. They were tearing it up against the Lions. Taylor Rapp, he's just kind of a guy. He's not that flashy, but he keeps making plays. Derwin James, of course, we know one of the best in the league.
Yeah.
And Amani Hooker against the Bills. So maybe they needed that kind of great free safety look there.
I really liked Amani Hooker when he was coming out of the draft. He just seemed like a guy where the top of his scouting report was his awareness. He just always seemed to know where the ball was going, and you could see him being a step ahead of everybody else. That was exactly what we saw this past weekend. He was anticipating where the ball was going, whether it was at the line of scrimmage, deep down the field. I thought he played fantastic, Amani Hooker did.
He was the Ohio State guy, right?
Iowa.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
got you.
yeah.
Who was the Ohio State guy? Wasn't there?
Malik Hooker.
I got you.
Yeah,
All right.
there we go. There we go.
Gotcha.
Who I also liked, but one career has been a little bit better than
One's
the other.
better than the other. There you go. All right. How about now? Let's get into some of the big games, and we'll spend a little time with some of these things. The Chiefs against the Titans. The Titans are a team, and unless you've actually watched them play a little bit, when they come on the field, it looks like the gladiators coming on the field. I mean, even the wide receivers, like they just, like you can almost hear the earth shake as these guys are coming out on the field, at least offensively. Derrick Henry, the whole bunch of them, going up against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are in a spot right now. I mean, you talk about, I know it's your team, but trying to stop the run, and now you have Derrick Henry coming in here. What up?
When we're on our show, I always just bring up the Chiefs and then just give it to Eric, and he just takes it away. So that's what I'm going to do here.
Yeah, they're in a rough spot because they can't get a good pass rush. Frank Clark has been almost non-existent for them against the run. They've struggled as well. A guy like Derek Nottie, who has traditionally played well for them, has not. And then there's the issue with Chris Jones. Like, Chris Jones has not played in recent weeks, but when he's played, they played him at defensive end, and he is not like an edge set. Like, he's not a natural defensive end, so they just struggle.
He's the guy out there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good player still out there, but he's not what he is inside.
Yeah, like they envisioned kind of the John Randall thing, where like John Randall could play like every position on the D line like a Pro Bowler, and they could mix and match. And I think they overestimated Chris Jones.
You know what's going on with him, right? That wrist.
Yeah, it's
like he literally cannot. Like, everything with a D lineman is jamming your wrist into somebody, and so he can't do it. So I think they were thinking, all right, we'll put him on the edge, and maybe he can work with his good wrist and try and come off of there. And it's just, it's a hard spot because I mean, they just don't. This Michael Dana is a good player, but he's kind of their third DN.
But even he's gotten sacks, but like all of their pressure rates are under 10%. Right, and if you can't get a pressure on more than 10% of your plays, you're just not going to win in the NFL. And what they did in their Super Bowl year was they blitzed a lot more. And I think like one of the things that could help them is they got Daniel Sorensen out of there, which I know in your game a couple weeks ago it was a mess. And they got Daniel Sorensen out of there. They put Juan Thornhill, a former second-round pick, in there. And I think if you blitz, you can maybe generate some pressure, but you have to tackle when the ball gets released. And with guys like Sorensen out there, they just weren't tackling enough, right? And so, but ultimately this game, and I think the rest of the Chiefs season is going to come down to how well the Chiefs can score. And right now the Chiefs are getting a score on 51% of their drives, and that's fourth in the NFL. A lot of that, but a lot of that will be cleaned up with getting rid of turnovers. And if they can do that, I think they can compete with the Titans. But long term, it's just unsustainable to ask your offense to score on 60% of drives.
And
so are they trying to get a running back right now? I mean, I keep hearing Mac from Indy is the one that everybody seems to be going after right now.
Well, the really tricky thing was they thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to be that sort of like James White for them, because like the issue with them is when they throw the football, Mahomes doesn't feel comfortable just outletting it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Last week with Darrell Williams, they did that 3 times. He forced a missed tackle on all 3 of his catches, 9 yards a catch. Like, it's weird, but like that was also when they won the Super Bowl. It was Damian Williams who kind of did the same thing. I think they'll be fine with these backups that are in, McKinnon and him. But when Clyde comes back, the question is going to be on early downs when you decide to throw the football. If your quarterback's not willing to dump the ball off to the running back when things aren't there, you're going to see a lot of what we saw in your game, Chris, which was nothing's there, and he's just going to ground it in the middle of the field, and they're going to play for another down. And against some defenses like Washington, you can. I think they were something like 8 for 8 on third downs in the second half. But you can't do that against the Bills. You can't do that against good teams in the NFL and win consistently.
It's just so shocking to me that Edwards-Helaire is so far removed from the player that he was at LSU, because I get that team was incredible. They were stacked across the board. They had all the offensive weapons to thin out the boxes and everything like that with the spread that they were running. But still, when Edwards-Helaire got the ball, whether they were handing the ball off to him or whether it was with him as a receiver, he looked great. He looked like that RB1 type, like he was drafted to be, and he just has not been that for Kansas City. And I agree, they're missing that element of their passing game, is having that running back be able to be that dependable guy to get you a couple yards. He has not been.
Brady had Kevin Falk before and James White after that, and Shane Vereen in the middle, right? Like you did the Super Bowl against the Patriots, Shane Vereen had like 11 catches in that game. Like that's the kind.
Right.
Like these offenses have super high floors when you can dump it to a back and get 6 yards.
Yep.
And unfortunately for Kansas City, like they resort to running the ball on early downs, which is not that high, ceiling. Or they ground the ball. Mahomes runs around and get wrist injury and stuff like that. They need a running back to come out of the backfield and make plays.
Yep.
They really looked at this, I think, as if we just fix the offensive line coming out of the Super Bowl. Of course, Mahomes chased all over the place. They do. I like what they did on the offensive line. Tooney and these 2 rookies, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, fantastic. They go out and they sign Orlando Brown, and yet it either hasn't come together, or it just maybe it's just going to take time. But Tennessee defensively, can they hold up? I mean, especially on the back end. We talk about the bad matchup with Derrick Henry running the ball against this Chiefs defense. Right. Flip side's true, right? If they can Tennessee get any pressure on Mahomes? They lose Farley in the game. The Fulton. I mean, they've got issues back there.
Yeah, I mean, they have some studs along the defensive line. They've got Harold Landry. They have Jeffrey Simmons, right? They've got some good guys there. And, Tennessee always just feels like this team that is like this giant killer when you don't expect them to be, right? I mean, the Chiefs in the regular season a couple of years ago, New England in the playoffs, Baltimore in the playoffs, obviously Buffalo last week. Like, all of these games where you go, okay, the Titans aren't going to win. They do. And they don't even just look competitive. They win the game. And so I feel like I can never count the Titans out of a matchup. And so, yeah, I mean, the secondary doesn't look great on paper against the Chiefs, but whose secondary does, really? I just have to look at how well Tennessee is continually coached and think that they got a chance.
Yeah, I think it's weird because I do think that Tennessee is coached interestingly, like, on the margins, right? Like, I don't think they go for the right 4th downs, et cetera, but it just does seem like they're bigger than the sum of the parts oftentimes.
Yeah,
and you also saw this in that game. Like, they didn't play well in the game against Buffalo, really. They got, Buffalo moved up and down the field. Mm-hmm. They settled for field goals, right? And they got an interception by Kevin Byard that really helped them out. But in the first half of that game, it was one long run by Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. It was one Julio Jones catch off of somebody's helmet.
Right.
And other than that, the offense didn't do much of anything. And you look at Tannehill, the last 3 seasons, 9 yards per attempt his first year in Tennessee, 7.9 yards per attempt last year, and now 7.3 yards per attempt this year.
Right.
It is not getting better there, but they're kind of like Derrick Henry continues to hang on. Like we talk about regression with running backs. We talk about falling off a cliff, and Henry is seemingly breaking all of the codes.
Yep.
And it's keeping them afloat.
Chiefs 4-point.
Yeah, it's 4.5. It got all the way out to 5.5, but people have bet back on the Titans. It's an interesting one. Last week, the Titans at home on Monday Night Football were 6-point dogs to Buffalo. This spread would seem to suggest that the Chiefs, although the Titans get a little bit lost because they have one less day of rest, this would seem to suggest that the market thinks that the Buffalo Bills are 2 points better than the Chiefs. Which does that make sense to anybody?
It just depends. I've got a theory on picking games and all that. One is that when a team's coming off one of their best performances, like Tennessee did, I mean, to beat Buffalo, that was raw, that was emotional, that was crazy, right?
Sure.
And generally, you don't put those performances back to back.
Well, that was the point of Buffalo, right? The point of betting Tennessee on Monday night was Buffalo was coming off a very similar win against the Chiefs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now you've got the same thing coming back here, and the Chiefs in desperation mode at this point, and the Titans, people are telling them that maybe they're a Super Bowl team now. I don't like the emotional combination here, even though my gut tells me, the Titans can just go bully them. The other part of the Titans is Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's like an old Forrest Gregg kind of guy. You're almost afraid to lose with him as your head coach. He might just come and go, bam, and just like bop you on the head or something. But I really do think that there's something about the ability to pound somebody the way that this team can, especially against a team struggling against the run, and then you throw those friggin' 2 big monster receivers down. Now, is Julio out?
They're both banged up.
Yeah.
I think that they're both probably going to play.
Seems like it.
A.J. Brown was fantastic Monday night.
Right.
And that was the first, I think, good game he's played all season. Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, the Chiefs, The interesting thing about Kansas City, and they've remained this way, last season only the Rams gave up less yards to wide receivers than Kansas City. The teams that really gave the Chiefs fits, it was one of your games, right? The Raiders with Darren Waller gave the Chiefs fits on defense. You know, early on, who was the guy that scored the touchdown last week for Washington? Was Ricky Seals-Jones. Yep. Like the Chiefs give up explosive plays to players that aren't wide receivers. And so the weird thing is I think this is why the Kansas City Chiefs have matched up well with Tennessee a few times over the last couple of years, is that like they, for some reason, Spags does limit wide receiver production. The question, and Dawson Knox was the guy that got loose on them on Sunday Night Football. Like Anthony Ferkser is probably the guy you want to play in fantasy this week,
right?
You know, and that to me is like a weird, you know, like I said, it doesn't add up to me how the Chiefs can stop Tennessee at all. But I think like that may be one where it's like Tennessee hammers you with Henry, but what they do is they kill you with Brown. Right. And they kill you with Jones. Right. And maybe the Chiefs are better against that than we think.
Yeah, I think it does. It takes a little bit of both for it to work with Tennessee. It's not just one or the other. I think everybody loves to obviously praise what Derrick Henry does, but it is what Derrick Henry does and then the handful of big passing plays that they might be able to get. That's how you get a Tennessee Titans win. And if the Chiefs can... Doesn't look like they're going to shut down Derrick Henry, but if they can just shut down what they might be able to do on the outside, perhaps that's the recipe that could be enough.
And the thing there is the Chiefs have lost these games because they've turned the ball over, right? They lost the Chargers game because they turned it over.
Yeah, and they can't stop anybody once they do turn
exactly.
the ball over.
They lost the Ravens game because they turned it over. The Bills game was the one game they probably lose no matter what. Every other team hasn't, you know, and so the issue becomes like to beat the Chiefs, you almost had to score on every drive. And now the tables have turned on the Chiefs and like they have to score on every drive to overcome their deficiencies.
Right.
And I think that's the kind of game this is.
There's so much pressure on Kansas City now because teams are forcing them to go 15 plays and just dink it and dink it and dink
Patrick Mahomes, his turnover or his big time throw rate's 3.8% this year. It's the lowest he's ever had for the reasons you said. He's
going crazy. I mean, you can see it. You can see it in the play caller. You can see it in the players on the field. They're like, ugh, you know, come on, come play. It's like somebody's hitting you with a jab all night and won't engage and fight, you know? The other thing is that, and here's my big betting number of the day, 3-13-1 against the spread, the Kansas City Chiefs, which means now for a season's worth of games that 3-13-1, which we're overvaluing these guys based on what they're doing on the offensive side. And Tennessee, with their boring style, 4-1 against the spread in the last 5 games. So does style draw bets? You know what I mean?
Styles makes fights in the betting market. You're absolutely right. Like matchups matter. I think greatly. The Monday night game. The reason why I like Tennessee on the show was because Buffalo likes to play too high and beg you to run the football, and they didn't play a ton of too high on Monday. They actually played run defense, but it's not their game, right? When you force somebody to play left-handed, it's always, and that's why when you look at like scheme uniqueness, we build this metric. Scheme uniqueness positively affects bets you make. So if you play the Shanahans, if you play the McVays, if you play the Dables, if you play the Romans and the Reeds, those guys do better, although Reed historically now, not so great lately. The making other teams play football differently than they want to affects them negatively.
Sure.
And Buffalo likes to play that too. Buffalo is built to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not built to beat the Tennessee Titans, you know? And so even though like those, you know, even though Tennessee is not as good as Kansas City, maybe they match up better. And that's like part of the betting, you know, handicap here.
Let's talk a little bit about the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers with the whole thing with I own you and all of that, which of course it's a social media sensation now. Right. But the interesting thing about Aaron right now is I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares about anything right now. You know, he's just sort of he's like this edgy guy. He started doing podcasts, which has given him a vehicle to go, oh yeah, well let me tell you what I think, right? And it's kind of okay with me. I remember the press conference at the beginning of the year. I go, I've never heard anybody in today's world just be honest at a press conference. It's a little bit refreshing. All the stuff that's inside the brain of Aaron Rodgers is just flooding out of his mouth right now in
Right.
a way that it's like a case study. You want to go, dude, this is awesome. And I always knew you sort of thought like this anyway, because that sort of edgy chip on your shoulder drives you to greatness sort of thing. But this is becoming a little bit of a weekly kind of thing now.
When we always get the best quotes when players are fed the hell up, right? I mean, with whatever situation is, when it's coaching, play calling, guys around him, situations, whatever, when that emotion boils over. And I think for Aaron, you talk about this year being so different for him. I feel like he feels the same kind of pain that Packers fans do. And it's like, our team's gone 13-3 the last 2 years, right? I mean, we basically had home field advantage all of the year before. We had home field advantage last year, and it wasn't enough. We didn't get there. We had the MVP at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers did everything he possibly could have last year to get his team to a Super Bowl and to win another one in his career, and it still wasn't enough. And I think that Aaron Rodgers is just fed up at this point, and I think that we're going to see it throughout the regular season. He's going to get overly emotional. He's going to continue to speak his mind because he doesn't care anymore. I think that he has followed the book or done things the way that you're supposed to do it as a quarterback, and it's got him regular season success, and here he is with one Super Bowl and an unbelievable career and just one Super Bowl to his name. So I think we're getting the full leather jacket, bike riding, long hair slicked back, sunglasses, Aaron Rodgers for all this season, and it's going to make for some great content this year.
Yeah, I think it's so funny, right? Because we've seen these teams in the AFC over the past few years, like they play the Chiefs early in the season and they lose, right? Like the Ravens would do this. And then the rest of the season, it's kind of like Lamar, is having these sort of like these games where it's like, oh, where's the engagement and all that, right? And then, Buffalo is the same way. And then finally they get off the schneid. And Cleveland now, after losing to Kansas City in week 1, they're not as engaged. I think Green Bay's kind of like this now, right? Like Green Bay knows Green Bay's big test is months from now, right? And and so when you watch them in week 1 against New Orleans, it's like, well, I can kind of understand why they got their asses kicked, right? Like, because I mean, New Orleans has way more to prove than them. And like, even when they're playing these games, like they didn't play a great game against the Bears. That game, they kept the Bears around the whole time. And it's like he sticks them at the end. And he's like, okay, we own you. But ultimately, like he's just like, this stuff is boring because I got to win in January.
Right.
I got to win in February.
He doesn't care about what he's doing right now.
Orneriness to the game.
Yes.
Where like last year he took his orneriness out on beating teams 35-3 every week, winning the MVP. And this year he's like, it's sort of weird, right? Like I get this impression that it's just kind of, it's kind of a weird season for them.
Speaking of weird, we have any explanation at all for Washington this year? I mean,
yeah. Chris, let's look at the quarterbacks that Washington beat last year, because everybody talked about how great their defense was.
This is Eric's favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah,
I love this.
He brings it up all the time.
Yeah. So the quarterbacks that the Washington football team beat last year were Carson Wentz, Ben DiNucci, and Andy Dalton. They injured Joe Burrow, and they were behind when they injured Joe Burrow, and then they got Brandon Allen. They got Andy Dalton again and beat him. They got Nick Mullins, Ben Roethlisberger, and Jalen Hurts / Nate Sudfeld in the game you had in Week 17. They did not beat one good quarterback last year. And in the playoffs, when they finally – the best quarter they faced, Russell Wilson once. They played okay against them. That was when the Seattle offense was reeling. Mm-hmm. And they played – I can't remember exactly, but they didn't play great quarterbacks at all last year's schedule. And – in the playoffs against Tampa Bay, we all look at the Heineke because of how well he played. They gave up 500 yards in that game. And the only reason they didn't give up 50 points was because Chris Godwin couldn't catch a pass.
Correct.
This year, the Washington football team's schedule of quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Matt Ryan, Patrick Mahomes, and now coming up, Rodgers, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson again, hopefully, Derek Carr, twice with Dak Prescott. Like, the die was cast on the Washington football team way before this, right? Mm-hmm. And like defense is way more of a product of who you play. And I think Washington football team's defense was more of a defense that can eat up bad offenses than it was a good defense.
So you bet down
under.
You
heavy.
did.
Yeah,
yes.
you
did.
I took a lot of crap for it. But but everybody, and the other thing is, like, this is another thing, and we're part of big media now, as Trevor likes to say. But like, anytime big media is all over a team, And it's because of like traditional football reasons, like great defense, tough head coach, Brian Fitzpatrick. It's like and I know Fitzpatrick got hurt, but I don't think we believe that he's going to go toe to toe with the quarterbacks I talked about.
No.
Like anytime the media buys into a team because, look at all that D-line. It's like D-line doesn't win in football, right? Like ultimately it doesn't overcome this kind of schedule. So like, it was kind of easy. And honestly, they might be under their win total. So they finished the season Cowboys, Eagles, Giants. They have 5 NFC East games. They might be under their win total even before they get to their NFC East.
Before they get to Prescott.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. So,
ouch. There we go. Well, it's just another shot at Washington area there. There you go.
Sorry.
But the Bengals and the Ravens now, are the Bengals ready to break through here? They're 0-5 the last 5 against the Ravens. You got to man up against this Ravens team. Now, you just do. You have to be able to stand in there. But you would think now with Hendrickson and Reeder and something, they're sort of should be built. And then who was it? Logan Wilson, who came out with the comment about, Lamar Jackson and, he's a running back playing quarterback. And here we go.
Right.
Here we go.
Right.
Let's get all the juice going here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Lamar Jackson's first career start came against the Bengals, and they won and covered the spread and all that good stuff. Well, actually, I think the Bengals covered the first game they played together. But, like, after that, it hasn't even been close, right? Like, the Bengals were a very competitive team last year and fun and plucky, and you're looking Joe Burrow, and he looks great. And the games where he just absolutely looked like he couldn't play were against the Steelers and against the Ravens. So it is a step up. The interesting thing about the Bengals, and I don't want to throw cold water on your team, Chris.
It's all right. They've had cold water on them before.
To this point, they've played the second easiest schedule in the NFL.
Yeah.
After this, they play the second hardest schedule in the NFL.
Yep.
So, like, I want to see Joe Burrow, like, sort of emerge. But I think for me, the Bengals might – and, again, this game here that could change everything. But the Bengals, to me, are more of a great story than a contender for that last AFC spot.
I would agree. All due respect to the start that they have at 4-2. I mean, it's great. When you have that kind of easy schedule early on, it's good that you're taking care of business, right? You can only play the opponent that lines up against you on Sundays. And so it's good that they've taken care of business there. But I don't think they're ready for the Ravens, especially not the way Lamar is playing. I mean, Lamar is playing at an MVP-type level, and I don't think the Bengals can keep up with them. I mean, this is a huge game. If the Bengals can pull this off, then all of a sudden we got to revisit how we're looking at the rest of their season because I think things get a little bit different. But they're almost a touchdown underdog in this game, and I think that there's a big reason for that. I just don't think they're ready.
Like, I'll say this. It shows you the evolution and everything, right? The Ravens are 5-1. Lamar Jackson's played the best football of his career so far.
Yeah.
They're at home, and they're only favored by a touchdown. Like, this game would have been -14 last year, like, even with Burrow. Like, it shows.
Right. They're going in the right direction.
It shows. And look, like, Zach, when you talk about, like, all the betting markets for first coach fired and all that kind of stuff, Zach Taylor was one of the first names everybody's saying, and I think he's bought himself some time. I think you look at that team.
Some breathing room, at least.
Yeah, you look at that team, and there's good components of the Bengals. Obviously Chase is fantastic. Boyd's great.
Yeah.
T. Higgins is good. The offensive line is held up. Jesse Bates is one of the better defensive backs in all of football. Trey Hendrickson's been productive. Like, there's a lot to like here, and I think this could be a game when you look back at it this weekend and say, okay, what good team's going to lose? What team's going to be the Chargers this week? What team's going to be the Bills this week?
Holy cow, the Chargers.
This is a possibility here. I do think the Bengals have a chance in this game.
Are we seeing NFL football goes in cycles, right? It just does. For a while there, you had tiny wide receivers, dupers, and the Claytons of the world, and then you had to get tiny cornerbacks and linebackers that could cover them. And then all of a sudden, people started flipping back, and they went to the 6'4" receivers and the power backs, and then they got bigger. It just keeps going back and forth, as we go. But right now, two of the best teams that we've been talking about clearly now are Baltimore in Tennessee, and a very old style approach to the game of football. I mean, it just is. It is a pound them with a running game. Now, completely different flair at quarterback running style with Baltimore, and much more of a traditional with Derrick Henry in Tennessee. But run the ball. When they come up and play one-on-one coverage against your receivers, all right, we're going to throw it then, and we're going to beat you with an accurate quarterback. Is there something in the atmosphere right now that says maybe we're underestimating that style?
Well, maybe so, because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Eric, but I believe over the last 2 or 3 years, the Ravens and the Titans are 1 and 2 when it comes to rushing in the league. Like, they're the teams that rush the football the most and for the most yards. But at the same time, they're doing that and then also doing things correctly in the passing game. Like when you look at the Titans when they had Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator. Yeah, Henry is their locomotive. He's the guy that they're always leaning on. But when they went to the passing game, it was a lot of progressive stuff. It was motion. It was play action. It was getting guys open. And so, like we already talked about with the Titans, they're able to complement that ground and pound game that is their focal point the way that they need to. And with Lamar, it's so hard to say, can you duplicate what Lamar is, because he's a one of one. But I mean, I think that there is something to having a strong run game and being a body blows team, if you will, as long as you are then doing the right things you need to do when you pass the football.
But can you win it all trying to do that? Now, we've seen teams historically that could do that, but the history of these two teams has been, I know they made it to the championship game, they get in against the best, and ultimately one of the top-end quarterbacks gets them.
Yeah, I think that in math we call this like the difference between like a global optimum and a local optimum, right? Like, so you look at you can't start a team from scratch. And like, I think the Ravens are a great example of this, where when you've gone for decades without being bad, you're not going to get the top 10 pick that you're going to need to have to get a quarterback that traditional football values, right? Like, look at what Andy Reid, like, what have the Chiefs had to do? They had to trade pick 27, a third-round pick, and a future one to move from 27 to 10 because the league was out to lunch on Mahomes, right? Like, Mahomes is a top 5 talent. They got lucky that he fell to 10, and they had to move heaven and earth to get him. They also had to trade a draft pick, 2 draft picks, and a huge contract for Frank Clark. Why? Because they're not picking in the top 10 where they can select edge players. That's where the Boses, the Clowneys, the Watts,
sure,
and those guys are all. So they have to be creative. The Ravens had to do the same thing, right? The Ravens are never going to pick in the top 5. They're never going to pick in the top 10. They have to be creative, and they sort of know. When they took Lamar, they're like, look, we're not getting the global optimum here, right? Like, this is not, if you could pick a team from scratch, you're almost always going to have a Mahomes or a Herbert or the traditional pocket passer who has athletic ability. But they were picking at 32, and they took Lamar, and they knew that they had to win differently. And I think because they're so smart on fourth downs, they're so smart with how they build their roster. They traded a backup kicker to the Vikings for a 5th-round pick. Like, they're smarter than everybody else, and so they can win. So the answer to your question is yes, you can win a Super Bowl doing this. Would it be the first, if you started a team from scratch, would it be the way you wanted to win a Super Bowl?
Yeah.
No, but they're working within the constraints that they have, and in a weird way, they're cursed by the fact that they're always relevant. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing. If you could be the Browns and bottom out and get Myles Garrett at 1, and then the next year get Baker Mayfield at 1, that's kind of but they don't have that luxury. And then the Titans are similar in that they had the Mariota at 2, but Mariota kind of put them in this kind of middle of the pack range where they could not, so then they built an offense around Derrick Henry. And again, I don't think the Titans can win a Super Bowl repeatedly, but can they win one? Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, the Ravens easily could have lost to Indy and Kansas City. I mean,
yeah.
Probably should have lost to those two teams,
Right.
And then we're going, what's the matter with the Ravens?
Right.
Instead, we're going, oh my God, Lamar Jackson's the MVP of the league because he had 2 unbelievable comebacks.
But I think that actually fortifies your argument. Like, when you look at the Titans, could they win one? Yes, because I think the games are so close, and they clearly know how to win with their own script. So I do think it's possible. But if you gave me, if you're going to,
if you gave me the field versus them, I'm going to take the field.
Correct.
But that
doesn't mean it's 0. And it just means you wouldn't bet on
we as analytics people look for the global optimum. But like sometimes these teams deal with realities, and the question becomes like, when do you decide to make a hard decision? We're gonna watch the Browns tonight, right? When do you make a hard decision to move on from Baker Mayfield or something like that?
Right.
When it's not popular,
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to win you games this year,
Yeah.
but maybe it's part of a long-term plan to win. Like that those are great questions, and I think like we have we're finally getting to them.
All right, I've got to go run do coaches calls here. Trevor, I know you're going to give me the top 5 list from the draft this year. We're already off and running here.
Woo!
Give it to me, baby.
Already draft season. Let's do it. Okay, I put out a mock draft this week. Number 1 overall, not really a shock. Kayvon Thibodeau, the pass rusher from Oregon. He's a real deal, folks. 6'5", 260 pounds. When he's been on the field this year, he has absolutely looked like a type of edge rusher that you would take number 1 overall, especially when there's not a quarterback there worth it. Eagles are picking 3 times in the top 10 because they have their own pick. They have Miami's pick, and then who else's pick did they have? What's the third one? I can't remember. They have another pick where it is 3.
They have the Dolphins.
That was the one I named.
Didn't they trade down
the
this year?
49ers. Yes, that's it. So those are the
Trey
three.
Lance.
Those are the 3 first-round picks they have. The first one, number 2 overall, I have them taking Derek Stingley. They've needed a corner for a long time now. Derek Stingley's the best one there.
Darius Slay playing really well. Pair those two together.
But like even though Darius Slay, like he's 31, he's getting up there too. So you need Stingley either way. Jacksonville Jaguars picking at number 3 currently. Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama. Look, folks, the investment of a franchise quarterback does not stop once you select them. You then owe that quarterback the next couple of drafts to invest in them, get the right offensive line, get the right weapons. That's what Jacksonville needs to do. Houston Texans at 4. I have them taking Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. Have absolutely no idea what's going on with the quarterback situation there, so that's all up to change. And then number 5, the player who I think has made the most money in college football this year, Aiden Hutchinson, the pass rusher from Michigan. I have him going number 5 to the New York Giants. They need a pass rusher bad. Their pass rush and their edge rush group is the lowest graded in the NFL right now, and so he would be a welcome.
All right, here's my argument.
Yes.
Every year, the best players end up on the mock drafts early. And then every year,
quarterbacks
there's 3 quarterbacks in the top 5.
I
It's
know.
like every year, no matter what.
I know.
I got to go. I've got to go talk to D'Amico Ryans. Guys, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate it.